Hey, Mike, I have a question. Does Beast shed?
I mean, everyone sheds.
And welcome to Context Club, a weekly podcast where Mike Williams and I dig through all the clues, context, and continuity that you will want to know about in your favorite entertainment mediums, whether it's video games, comic books, movies, TV. We're here digging up all the dirt, telling you things that you didn't know, or maybe things that you'd like to know. What's going on, Mike? I'm happy to be back here with you. Hanging. This week we're talking about X-Men.
Things are going great. So we're talking about X-Men 97.
Yes.
The new series that just started on
Wednesday?
Disney Plus.
Yeah.
From Marvel Animation. It's the first, well, no. What If still is Marvel Animation as well. It's a nice original continuation of the original series, X-Men the Animated Series, which started on Fox Kids in like 1992.
I remember it fondly.
Yeah, which is real weird to me. So they call it X-Men 97
Yes.
because the original series ended with the episode Graduation Day on September 20th, 1997. So this is to say that it is picking up in this mythical 97, like if we kept going. Except, like, what are you going to do for the next season? Like, they've already written 2 seasons. So is the next season 98?
No, it just stays 97, right? It just stays 90. It's forever 97.
If it's forever 97, then it should have been called X-Men 92, right?
Because the show started in 92?
Because the show started in 92.
I mean, it gets even weirder when you think like it's not 4:3 anymore, it's 16:9. There's a lot of, new animation techniques being used. They were, clearly, and we'll get into this, but they very like respectfully, I think, recreated this show in the image of its predecessor, of the original series that came before it. And I think they found a really good balance there, like an almost impossible balance of like, it looks like the old thing, but there's clearly a lot of new kind of techniques and things being used as well.
Yeah, this is a pretty good looking show. Like they tried to run that line of bringing back that old feel of the show while also allowing for some new techniques. And I mean, it's clearly at some points you can tell, oh, those are CG models, but they're animated in such a way that it really works. Like it feels like the old thing, but they can also do some real interesting stuff. And it's clear, like from the very beginning, you start off the show and it's some of the X-Men, Cyclops, Bishop, Storm, fighting against the Friends of Humanity, and Cyclops just gets to stunt.
Oh,
and
man.
That's the kind of scene, like, I'm not saying they couldn't have done it hand animated, like I'm sure there are Japanese animators and others who would have made it look as good, but certainly not back in the day in the original show.
Sure.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And 3D allows them to do some other interesting things, like you see later when Jean Grey ends up in sort of this mindscape. There's a bunch of Kirby crackle dots, and it's a nice effect. It just looks really cool.
Yeah, there's certainly some filters going on and stuff too. Like there's like intentional like artifacting. It's not like complete CRT scan lines or anything like that, but I did notice some like strange artifacts with certain colors and certain scenes. It doesn't seem like it's on all the time, which is weird, but yeah, it's really fascinating. And like you said, I do have to point out, Cyclops gets to stunt a lot. Whoever made this, whoever wrote these, like, loves Cyclops, because I mean, even the dynamics between Wolverine and Cyclops are kind of like played down in a way where, like, I guess they're trying to put a little more respect on Cyke's name here, but yeah, I don't know. It certainly seems a little more slanted than I remember. Right?
I'd say Cyclops, at least. So the first episode is mostly vibes.
Sure.
Like the plot doesn't really super kick in on that first episode.
Well,
It
it's
is
like,
just like this is the stuff that is carrying on from the show before. Like we're establishing a foundation here, as opposed to like I think the second episode really gets to the meat of it. And I will say overall from these first two episodes, I watched the original X-Men the animated series as a kid. I do not think it was all that good.
yeah.
And this is much better than that, just from a writing and characterization standpoint.
Oh man.
Of the X-Men cartoons, I would say X-Men Evolution is more the one that I'm like, yeah, X-Men
No
Evolution
way,
is it.
really?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
original all the way. I think yes, it definitely has like some wild in terms of the animation to like give the show credit. I feel like it was a cooler looking show. Like there's a lot of lightning effects. It's one of the first shows I remember that like even just in the post credit scene they had like computer animations of the characters spinning around, which have kind of brought back like. But there some of the effects like Gambit like charging stuff in a cartoon show. I hadn't really seen anything. We had G.I. Joe, which had the cool laser effects and stuff, and other things like that kind of happening in Ninja Turtles and stuff here and there. In terms of animation, I feel like yeah, the characters have always been kind of stiff, almost like Hanna-Barbera, like original Johnny Quest era or like pre Johnny Quest era, like in terms of their movements and stuff. And they've fixed a lot of that here. I think some of it they still do on purpose to kind of keep it like true to the style of the original. But man, like for me, this was the show. Like this is like I think we were talking offline last week where like my exposure to X-Men originally I had been in comic book stores a few times. So I didn't really hang out there because I was younger at the time. But my brothers would go in and then sometimes I'd get to pick a comic or something. But they also my brothers had these like trading cards. So I'm like, man, these characters look so cool. And I'd see all the trading cards and read about them. And when I saw the show finally, I was like, this is incredible. You know, this is a time when we don't have access to a lot of anime, right? Like you're super lucky if you could catch any like Japanese animation at all. And like, obviously there's been a huge shift in the industry now where every cartoon feels like at one point was kind of trying to crib the anime style in one way or another or learn different things. And there's still like very much a distinct Western style, right? But I think like the West started borrowing a lot of that stuff. But man, I'm getting off on a tangent, but just my exposure to X-Men originally, mostly what I learned about X-Men was from this show. And like it does have problems. It has a lot of flaws in terms of they're fitting like whole comic book arcs into a 30-minute episode or something. And it's just like, whoosh, you get like Rogue's origin story, you get Wolverine origin story.
Yeah.
The most they give you is like 2 episodes for like a big or 2 or 3 like mini series for like a big arc. And like they got to cram it in. And I think there's some of that going on here too. But yeah, man, what I will say about this new show is like, it's got me pumped. Like I've been playing Marvel Snap mostly because of my love for X-Men, right? And obviously the Avengers hype, but it's just been so cool to build decks with X-Men in it. And now like seeing a Sunspot in the show, it's like that synergy is working for me, man. It's really there. Like it's maybe a little cynical, but like, yeah, synergy works in this way. That's my quick. X-Men
Yeah, I mean,
but
like I said, for me, it's even better than the original. Like they're doing some pretty good stuff, and the CG of it only breaks down occasionally. Like you're like, oh, okay, that couldn't have been hand animated. I can see the model, the particular lighting or whatever. But for the most part, they do a good job, and I feel like the writing is a little bit better.
yeah, well, yeah, narratively, right? There's shows that stand out to me, like the animation of like Batman the Animated Series is almost untouchable. Like it's wild what they did with that show coming from like that Looney Tunes era of cartoon animation and stuff. And you look at something like Batman the Animated Series, just like instantly classic, instantly recognizable. Just it's probably like the best animated show of all time. Maybe, I don't know. Like that's a different conversation. But like in terms of narrative, I don't think there's a lot of cartoons made for kids that hold up how like these old X-Men shows do, or like attack like some of these issues. Like I remember the Nightcrawler episode where he's living in a monastery and there's people who are like afraid of him. They think he's the devil and stuff. Like that's heavy stuff for a kid, you know? And then obviously all the like very not even subtext, right? Like this X-Men is about diversity, it's about found family, and it's about racism very clearly up front. In the first 2 episodes of that original series, you get all of that. You get people out on the streets, like just hatred is there and vivid, and like people protesting the very existence of these characters and people. And man, that first episode is just so strong for me. So narratively, yeah, like I saw someone at IGN saying the same thing, Mike, too. Like, oh, the first 2 episodes are better than any episode that's ever been written in the series so far. I'm like, wait. Hold on just a second.
I'm not sure I'd go that far.
The pacing is way better, for sure. The pacing is really much better.
And like even the problems with the animation, and this is, kind of the things that I in both directions, the problems with the animation in the past is partially because of the fact that they needed to, we talk about anime influence, like some of these were probably animated by Japanese animators, like, stuff was outsourced and stuff, but they had such a deadline crunch just to get episodes out for a season that they probably, they were cutting corners. They were trying to keep shots as still as possible while, like the shot that just popped up there, which was from the end of was from the last episode of the previous, X-Men animated series. And it was just sort of everyone standing there looking in one direction, maybe a little hair moving, like that kind of thing. Sort of exists all over old cartoons and X-Men the animated series in particular. And in this one, like I said, on the other side, the fact that occasionally you see the model, like you're like, oh, that's definitely a 3D model there, and it just isn't blended quite as well, is again like we have X amount of time to produce this show. And like the animation there is pretty good for the time.
Yeah.
In terms of effects and stuff, but some of the stuff is definitely like, look, man, we're trying to make 20 odd episodes a year or something like that. We're doing the best we can. In both directions, the constraints are there.
Yeah, and it's kind of important to note like how faithful the show kind of was to the comics too, which is, I feel like there's like a lot of liberties and stuff, but in terms of the costuming and stuff like that, it's like, oh, these are these characters. Like they didn't meddle with it in that way too much, which was kind of nice, I think, because you could see it in the comic books. They're like, oh, that's that character. Like,
and it was based on a very specific iteration of the X-Men, which was the Claremont and Jim Lee era, like Chris Claremont and Jim Lee, that, the adjectiveless X-Men, which sold a ton of stuff. Like that's the team that ends up here. All those storylines are the ones that end up here, like the Gambit and Bishop, and then sort of everything else is sort of a grab bag of X-Men history built around that.
Yeah.
And as we talk about the episodes, you'll see some of that in that, like, oh, hey, in this story, this character was there, but in the continuity that they have here, that character isn't a part of the team, isn't a part of a thing. Like none of that has happened. So they just sort of have to switch in and out.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, we can talk more about the episode specifically, but it felt to me like this first episode and the second one, even, they're kind of just wrapping up loose ends. Like I've just noticed in the marketing a lot. There's a lot of Mr. Sinister, and if you like, I was watching some of the old episodes before I watched the new ones, and there's like kind of an arc where they set up the origin of Mr. Sinister and all of that, and it just kind of left kind of unanswered. It's like Xavier has a dream basically, or they make it seem like there's like this whole episode's like a flashback to the past of like, the origins of Mr. Sinister, kind of collecting mutants and collecting DNA and stuff and doing nefarious stuff. They don't really show you what he's up to, but like there's murder involved and different nefarious things. And he kind of just gets away at the end. And then Xavier wakes up. He's got the book on his desk, the journal from the old, like, the Xavier from the past, right? It's a lot. It's a ton. And that's just kind of left open. So I guarantee you, like, I don't know how much we want to go into the spoilers, but we're going to see a Mr. Sinister arc in this new era for sure, because they're wrapping up like the like these other stories, like with Guy Ritchie and with Master Mold and that sort of thing. Like they're like, we're placing things in time, right? It's an organization that really, like you're pointing out here, didn't exist in the original series because it just seemed like they're so all over the place. Like, what big popular comic art can we just ram into the show so that like lots of people will watch it or something like that? Or like what would be good to adapt here? What's the splashiest thing we can do for a season finale or something like that? And now it feels like we're actually on track to have like a good continuity where it's not like the Monster of the Week or something like that. But I don't know. Some of that worked well for the first 2 seasons of the original X-Men, the animated show, but then it started to fall apart, I think, towards the end there.
Yeah, a little bit. And, production schedules, time, sometimes, and they're like, I'm not even sure if we're going to get another episode, another season or whatever.
Right.
And I'd say episode 1 is really the one that's like, let's finish off where we'll give you the vibes. Remember who these folks are.
Yes.
What the current team is. And we're going to sort of wrap up the finale episode of the last one.
Yeah.
Which
let's just tuck that away.
Which was Graduation Day, which briefly is popping up in the video right now. Where Henry Peter Gyrick, as he just did there, he turned a TV remote on Professor Xavier, which was an energy disruptor, and it made his powers go haywire and started to kill him. So instead of actually dying, he decides to leave the Earth with Lilandra from the Shi'ar Empire. The show, X-Men 97 Episode 1, treats him as dead.
Yeah, they kind of do.
But he never actually died
right
in X-Men the animated series. He just went to space.
Yes.
And then I guess we just assume here's his last will and testament. If he's not on Earth, we're going to legally count that as a dude is dead.
Well, I mean, like, if you have multiple names in the United States, if you have multiple names, like 4 names, like 2 middle names and a last name, or 2 last names or a hyphen, you're pretty much doomed at the DMV. Like when you get your license, like they don't know what to do with you. So I imagine having your consciousness or even your physical body whisked away by the Queen of the Shi'ar or the leader of the Shi'ar probably isn't fit any of those government boxes for like. You're just dead, basically. We get the death certificate in this show. We get a mention that, like, there's a mention, I think, in the first episode of X-Men 97 that it's, like, Xavier's mind that's being preserved. They don't really say anything about his, like, physical shape or form. So that was interesting, for sure. And I give him credit is, like, they didn't revert it, right? They didn't retcon it. They're like, this is the situation now. And, I think we can defer to you, Mike, about like how this lines up with comic book arcs, but this is the situation now. And this is the effect, like cause and effect, very principal mechanic of good storytelling. There's cause, there's effect. Now what? Like now you take your characters kind of through the ringer and they have to deal with the aftermath. Right. And that's what makes stories exciting, I think, for me, at least.
Yeah, no, and I agree. Like, and that's part of the fun of why they sort of speed run storylines. They're just like, here's the thing that's happened. We have a very specific cast. How do they react to what is going to happen? So we get like I said, the incredibly dope opening fight scene with Storm, Bishop, who joined the team off screen. Like he was essentially...
He's been in and out, I feel like. In that,
yeah, he was in and out in the original show.
Yeah, in the original show, he's in and out. But he seems like he's constantly trying to get back to his own time. And in this, he's just hanging out. He's just like, I'm here now. Let's do this. There's no, like, time paradox issue happening. It's just like, Bishop's just here. And we're not worried about it, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So then they essentially save a young mutant who is revealed to be Roberto da Costa, who maybe some Marvel Snap players or some X-Men fans will know as Sunspot.
Yeah.
Sunspot originally appeared in Marvel graphic novel number 4, which introduced the New Mutants, which was Xavier's new young team. He's one of my favorites visually, and in episode 2 they show briefly his power, but it is one of the cases where I'm like, oh, okay, see, the modern animation techniques allow them to do some more interesting things.
Sure. It feels like he kind of he's like the new Jubilee, I guess, like for this series. It's like if they were kind of pulling like a Star Wars and kind of retelling a tale here, or having an opening with the interests of the characters where it's like, Jubilee gets loose in the X Mansion, and then she's like introduced to the characters that way, and also she's obviously saved at the mall and things like that beforehand. And in this we have Sunspot, who's now kind of taken that role. I feel like a little bit where it's like, oh, this is like a school for people like me, but his kind of perspective, since he comes from, I guess he's really rich, right? And he comes from wealth, so he's just like, I'm just gonna kind of lay low and not not deal with this at all, and just go back to being a party guy or what. It's a really cool dynamic. It's like different, I guess, at the very least.
Yeah, it is like Jubilee is like Kitty Pryde 2.0, and in this case, we get a Jubilee 2.0.
Sure.
Even though Jubilee is still on the team.
Yes.
But really, other than a great fight scene towards the end, and they do some really good shots. Like there's a moment where Scott tells Storm, hey, give him the forecast. And then Storm goes full Storm on everybody, and there's a shot of like Sentinel body parts falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
And it like they do some really good shots.
Yeah, that stuff with Storm is fantastic. Yeah. And there's even one before, I forget which one it is, where they're in the warehouse or something, and then the storm hits, and you're like, oh, here we go. Like, here we go. It gets really exciting. But yeah, it's just, yeah, when Storm comes in and she's doing her Storm stuff where she's kind of monologuing a little bit, you got to get a little bit of that. It just feels so good. And like you said, like Cyclops is definitely stunning. We're seeing Cyclops do things in this episode. I don't think he's like using his optic blast to push him around, which is, I don't think we've seen a ton of that before, at least animated wise. Maybe in the X-Men anime. I don't know if you watched that, but
it's actually a pretty new thing. Like it does lean on the idea that Cyclops' powers are not like laser beams or anything. They are just visual representations of physical force coming out of his eyes. As some people say, punches from the punch dimension. So it's interesting to see him do some of that stuff, and then he does it again for a superhero landing at the very end. Like my man goes flying out of the Blackbird first, and yet he's the only one to be like, "Nah, I don't need any help. I'm good, y'all.
Yeah.
Don't you worry about me."
Now I've started to have theories about this, right? If the focus here is on Cyclops and there's just so much Cyclops love, it's like, no, we can't show him being carried by another member of the team. Like, we can't show that. He's got to save himself. And so he gets does the optic blast to save him. I thought that was, that's like, okay, come on. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's all stunning. Like I said, this episode was ending up and vibes. And then at the very end, we get sort of the impetus for the rest of the show, which is Cyclops is like, man, I just don't know what to do now that the professor is gone, but maybe everything will be all right. And then Magneto is there, just looking fly, just long hair, just blowing and just and he reveals that Xavier left everything to him, which we'll talk about more. But this is an event that happened in the comic itself. It happened in Uncanny X-Men 199 and 200, so it was like a milestone issue for them. And many of the same events that happen sort of in episode 2 of the show are recontextualized, are used from X-Men 199 and 200.
So would you say that, do you say there's like a lot of ground to tread here, or do you think this is something they're going to not spend that much time with?
So they've given us episode titles.
Oh.
And like the original show, it feels like they're going to get through like whole story arcs in an episode.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. And it's probably because they're gearing up to tell more X-Men stories in new ways. Maybe there's new animated shows coming. Maybe, we know there's probably movies on the way and that sort of thing. So I kind of get that. And in doing this, like, which we haven't really gotten into, but the way they've gone about making this show and the reason that it exists, or like why it exists, is such a fascinating product of like our time as like media history. Like I can't remember anyone going back to a show, right, and saying like, we're going to make it look like it did before. We're going to play on the fact of like the style. Like usually you would just reboot it, right? Usually they would just redo a new X-Men show and put that out and make that as snazzy as possible. But to pull on the nostalgia heartstrings here is just like a really interesting and fascinating thing to me.
And I feel for Marvel is probably opening a little bit of a Pandora's box, because now everyone wants, the Spider-Man. They want either the classic Spider-Man to continue,
No way.
or Spectacular to start up again. Like, please do X. Neither of which I think will happen, considering they have their own Spider-Man series called Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man now.
You got Team Spidey for the little kids. There's so much Spider-Man stuff fired up now. There's no looking back for Spidey, I think.
Yeah. Whereas this, it's a pretty classic X-Men team. Just probably we've done a ton of other characters, and there are some heavy hitters that are missing in this roster. Like Shadowcat or Colossus or something like that.
Sure.
But this is a pretty heavy, meaningful roster for a lot of people. And it's good to see it back.
Yes.
And of course, now we're also wondering, like, are they going to be doing more shows, like bringing back more classic shows? And how much will this factor into the MCU? Because we still, at some point, will have the X-Men. It'll be years down the line. But how much this is actually produced by Marvel Animation under Marvel Studios. Obviously, the response to this is going to get back to Feige and may inform how the eventual X-Men films go.
Sure.
Like, will they be like, yeah, this is the team here is going to be the team. Like, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Gambit, Rogue, etc. Like, is that the thing? Like, oh, hey, they really enjoy what we're doing with Cyclops here. So we're going to make sure that movie Cyclops does the same stuff. Like, or, stuff like that. It's X-Men is such a long-running property with so many characters that putting together a team, much like Avengers, is like half the fun.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think even with like stuff like First Class, when they like redid X-Men with those kind of like going back and trying to do kind of prequel type of situations for like alternate universe stuff, I think even then it was kind of confusing for them of what to do with these characters or who to pull, who's got star power. And obviously this is like just leading into the time of like the rise of the Avengers. That it's so wild to me that we live in a world where the Avengers got way bigger than the X-Men ever were. And just watching this show again just reminded me just how dope X-Men can be and how good these characters are. And like, for me, just how much stronger of a roster and a lineup and a team like these X-Men characters are than Avengers. At least for me personally, I always felt like I loved Captain America growing up, and Iron Man was okay, but he kind of seemed off to the side. And Hulk and Spider-Man obviously great. And they didn't even get into the Avengers roster till like later in the cycles and stuff too, right? So like, it's really exciting to feel like we're getting a new era of X-Men. It's super, super fun.
Even if this the new era that we're seeing here is an old era, harkening back to this is X-Men 97, the 90s cartoon, and these stories are harkening back to like the 80s.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot. So like going in episode 2.
Yeah, let's do episode 2.
Which is Mutant Liberation Begins. Cyclops and Jean is pregnant, and they were going to roll out, but since Magneto is taking over, they're like, nah, we can't leave this to him. And we get to see Magneto just vamping around the mansion in the wonderful M costume, which was designed by John Romita Jr. and debuted.
Let me pull that up. Sorry, I haven't been slacking in my duties here. Let me pull that up. Go ahead, John Romita Jr. And we've got that X-Men costume here somewhere, I believe. Let me pull it up for you. There he is. I think we've got a better one. There it is. Here we go.
Yep.
There you are.
Yeah, and that's the M costume. This is the cover of Uncanny X-Men 200, which is the trial of Magneto, which is essentially like most of the storyline here, with Magneto deciding to turn over a new leaf now that his friend is gone, and the governments of the world take him in, and they're like, we're going to put you on trial. And somehow in the original and in this, they're like, yeah, we're going to let you off with like probation.
Yeah, sure.
Which is like, what? like even on the low end, it's just like,
yeah,
that doesn't make sense.
They even reference Asteroid M, right? Like an asteroid that was going to slam into Earth, right? As it's partly mainly a result of Magneto's actions, on top of countless other infractions. This guy throws cop cars around like just little tiny toys, like ants, nonstop throughout the even like the animated series itself. Not even just counting the comics, but he's done a lot of bad stuff, and a lot of people have gotten hurt. So. And then also the way that it's framed in this episode, we get the court case, he's pleading his case, which is like, that's all fine and well. Like, it's well delivered. It's a good monologue. And I think it's representative of Magneto as a character and his perspective, but also the idea that like, there's no world in which you take the justices and that system, hurl them up into space, and then plead your case alongside, this assassin who's coming in, this would-be assassin. There's no way that this doesn't, especially in the era we live in now, in reality, there's no way that Magneto doesn't get blamed for all of that. There's no way this isn't a coup, that he set the whole thing up. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's out there, but like, or, also like you could see his actions as a threat to these people, right? Who had determined his fate, right? There's like a lot of different ways you could spin this, but the story's got to get told. It must go on. The dynamic of having Magneto, the X-Men's one of their greatest villains of all time, now being in charge of that, like being their leader, right? Has always been a cool dynamic, like even in the comics. And it's like, you have to explain it away somehow, anyway, to have this kind of narrative arc. Because it is really fascinating. It's like, we used to get this a lot, I think, in a lot of different comics. Like, it's almost like these what-if scenarios of, like, what if Magneto was in charge of the X-Men instead of Xavier? And, like, how would that look? And we get to explore that in comic books. And now we get to explore it in this show, I think, which is really interesting. And also, certainly correct me if I goofed anything.
No, you're right. And this is, like 3 different stories. 3 that they've pulled together sort of in this one moment here with the trial of Magneto. Like you see on the cover here, the characters on the left are the Fenris twins, and they're the ones that attack the trial in order to get even with Magneto. And in the show, it is Friends of Humanity, which is one of the many mutant-hating terrorist groups from the comics, as led by the Executioner, which is another one of those things where like the Executioner is like this FBI guy who's using like Marvel's super science and alien tech to hunt mutants, but he's like a 90s character.
Yeah.
And like he looks like a 90s character.
I mean, his rifle that he's augmented, right, to be able to take down one of the strongest mutants in history does look like a super soaker. It's a dead giveaway. Like, it looks like one of the... I'm like, just love to see it. Like, they stayed true to that show and its origins. This is what I mean by, like, they struck an impossible balance of making this show look like it came from 97 in the best way. But yeah, he definitely is a 90s character through and through there.
Yeah, and he appeared in Uncanny X-Men Annual number 17. We do have a shot of that cover as well.
Where's it? Let me see. Tell me.
No, go back. You were at it
Close.
right there. Keep going.
One forward.
Yeah.
Is this him here?
So, yep.
Okay.
That is him. That is the first time he ever appears in X-Men canon. Just a over-designed mess, which kind of fit with his thing in that he was using a whole bunch of different technology in order to hunt mutants. And they've just sort of pulled him in here as one of the resident leaders of the Friends of Humanity. And he takes a shot at Magneto and inadvertently hits Storm. And following that, she has no powers. And that is an actual storyline. Again, we're talking about mixing storylines from like many issues before. It's X-Men 185. So keep going.
Forward?
In terms of, yep.
This guy here?
Keep going.
One more?
Nope, keep going. Keep going.
This guy.
Another one.
Sorry, we're spoiling all the good.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff. But
Here's guy. Savior getting blasted. Got New Mutants we kind of talked about. Let's see, did I miss one?
You may have missed one.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull it up. You can keep vamping and I'll pull it up.
Yeah, so essentially it's in the original comic, it's Uncanny X-Men 185. The U.S. government and Gyrick are aiming for capturing Rogue. And in the show, Gyrick is a fairly big mutant-hating bigot. In the comics, he's more of just like the super stringent cop, like government cop type character. He is sometimes villainous, but not really. And in the comics, they're trying to capture Rogue, who had joined the team just prior. Okay, so, yeah, right there. That's the issue with Rogue Public Enemy. And then if you scroll down after that to the next image.
Gotcha. This one here.
So this is Gyrick shooting at Rogue and Storm taking the hit. And then she goes down, and after that, she does not have any powers. In this case, Gyrick is sort of like Rogue has been on the X-Men, but as far as Gyrick is concerned, same thing as Magneto. She was on the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She had done evil things. She needed to be arrested and tried for her crimes. Storm is sort of helping her out, gets in the way, and Storm loses her powers. And that leads into the next issue is a storyline. If you scroll down to the next image after that. A storyline called Life Death, with Storm dealing with the loss of her powers. And one of the episodes, actually two of the episodes for X-Men 97 this season are called Life Death. There's a Life Death Part 1 and there's a Life Death Part 2.
So we're going to get there, you're saying?
Yeah. So we're definitely going to have Storm deal with sort of the loss of her powers and becoming a human for the first time. But like you see how we've sort of weaved in, like in the original it was Gyrick shooting at Rogue and Storm taking the hit. And then Trial of Magneto was actually like many issues after that, and actually had the Fenris twins and robots attacking the Trial. And it was just done in an issue because they really just wanted to get Magneto on the X-Men. Which is part of the thing here. And then we have sort of the Rogue and Magneto romance, which is like much later. Like that's also a 90s thing. And then we also have the birth of Nathan Summers. Jean goes into labor while Cyclops and some of the others are at the Trial, and Wolverine has to drive her to the hospital.
Yes.
And the baby, Nathan Summers, is born. In the comics, he was born off screen. Literally, this image that we're showing here is from X-Men 201, which is right after the trial of Magneto. So, like, basically, there's the trial, and then the next issue, like, it just opens like, oh, and Madeline Pryor had her baby. And this will probably factor in. So I'm trying not to go too far to
How much is too
not
much?
spoil it for people. But the redhead here is not Jean Grey. It is a character called Madeline Pryor, who is somewhat related to Jean Grey in a manner. As far as this page of the comic is concerned, Madeline is not Jean. No one thinks she is Jean.
Sure.
In the show, we have Jean, who is with Scott, and they are going to leave the X-Men, which is very much like, if you go to the image before, scroll one up. No, after. So
there we go.
So this is Cyclops leaving the X-Men the first time, which happens after the Dark Phoenix saga.
Sure.
And Jean Grey dies, and Cyclops is like, I'm very sad that she died, and I don't know if I believe in the dream anymore. So he takes a sabbatical, and then scroll up one image.
Let's go this way?
No, other way.
This one?
Yeah. And so this is 201. This is where Nathan is born, but this is also where Cyclops and Storm have a duel, a danger room battle to decide who is going to lead the X-Men.
Right. Okay, yeah. This is familiar.
Right. And Storm is wearing her super cool mohawk and leather outfit, but she's gotten her powers back by this point. Cyclops loses, and the idea here was Claremont wanted to give him the happy ending. Like, you get to go off and enjoy your life. That is not what happened. So yes, at this point, Cyclops has a son with Madeline Pryor, who is just supposed to be an average, ordinary redhead lady who seems a whole lot like Jean Grey. And Cyclops, the whole impetus for this duel is Cyclops didn't want to actually leave the X-Men, and Madeline and Storm are friends, which again, shades of the show itself in episode 2, where Jean and Storm are very close.
Yeah, we see them in the room, kind of talking about what's the future of a baby look like when there's so much hatred in the world, right? The weight of being a mutant in this world that hates them and having to constantly be on your guard. And we see Storm and Jean kind of have a really nice moment. This is actually one scene I've seen people tearing apart the animation, where people have been saying like, "Oh, it's so choppy, it looks so bad." It's like, come on, it looks fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. Don't worry about
it. And that's reflected in this issue of the comic, where Storm and Madeline sort of have a talk, and Madeline's like, I know he's not going to leave the X-Men. There's too much stuff happening. Magneto just came back, yada, yada. And Storm's like, what if I beat him up and sent him away? And that's essentially what happens. Like Storm takes control of the team by winning the duel, and Cyclops just sort of sulks away with his brand new family.
Yeah. And this is how you know the show really likes Cyclops, because at the same time, it's an interesting dynamic. They've kind of hit the opposite note here, where it's like Cyclops can't give it up. In X-Men 97, he's obsessed with making sure like things work out or things are going to go well. He can't really just like leave the X-Men, I guess, like once Magneto is in the picture and he gets too worried, right? And he's not even there when Jean goes into labor. It's early. Wolverine's got a driver, right? And then and he, luckily, they just swap in the middle of the battle. They're like, Cyclops has to go to his baby. It's being born. And
that's also reflected in the comics. So like I said, the kid is born off screen.
Yeah.
And they don't mention Madeline really for 199 and 200 or anything, or even the preceding issues, I don't think. And then in 201, the first shot is with the baby and Madeline and the team. And part of that issue is Madeline being like, yeah, Cyclops wasn't here. Like, he was not here for the birth of his son. I was in the mansion alone. I had the kid by myself. I don't really want to be a part of all of this. And the show is like, no, I mean, he's got to go to.
Yeah, he's got to be there, right?
He's got to go, even though this is literally an attack in a UN building. Like, he's got to be there for the birth of his son.
They didn't even switch. Like, I thought we were going to get to see, like, oh, Wolverine's going to enter the battle and we're going to get some cool, like a really cool Wolverine moment, which we haven't really gotten yet. Like, we got the opposite of a fastball special where Wolverine gets thrown into Beast, who's inside of a Sentinel, right? We get the opposite of fastball special, which is kind of neat. But and then somehow they turn that into like them landing into a cool hero pose with the whole team, which was awesome. But they just bring Cyclops to the hospital, and then it's like everything's gonna be fine. And obviously Magneto's very powerful, and I think he kind of handles it from there, right? This is how it goes. But it's interesting creative choices here.
And then the episode ends on another cliffhanger, and this is a big curveball that is completely of their own origin.
Wow.
Where, this is completely this show's thing, where Cyclops and Jean Grey are about to leave, and then someone comes to the front door, and it is Jean Grey. What that means, again, I will not speculate or even dive too deep. If you really want to dive in yourself, look up Madeline Pryor and see some of that stuff. And we have seen characters and costumes involving storylines with Cyclops and Madeline Pryor and Jean Grey and the whole mess around that sort of triangle. And in this case, it's obviously going to be a square because we have two Jean Greys. Oh, no. One is pregnant with Cyclops' kid. The other one is fresh. And Wolverine has some romantic stuff to work through.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, at the same time, we have another... While there's a chance for Wolverine's romance to grow,
we've got the other triangle, yes.
We got the other triangle, which is Rogue, Magneto, and Gambit. That is another throwback to Rogue and Magneto having a thing that is a 90s thing. And then they brought it up after it.
The gist behind that is that he's powerful enough that he can withstand her, like, siphoning his power. Like, so that
yes, he is technically, due to his particular powers, immune to her mutant power, which means he can touch her hand. And so in the comics, her and Gambit sort of have a thing. Then we have this weird sort of Magneto tangent, like twice in two different. And one version with amnesia, we won't talk about that. In this one, it seems we're sort of flipping things around, and that it is alluded to that Magneto and Rogue had a relationship prior.
Yes,
that we just didn't know about.
Which is really interesting because I don't think they I mean, the animated series, if you haven't watched it yet, there's a lot of Rogue history there too, and there's the relationship between Rogue and Gambit is kind of always there. There's this I think it's part of a 2-part series maybe where Gambit has to go back home and deal with some stuff, and he disappears, and Rogue gets real worried about him, and it's kind of this arc where they really realize like how much they mean to each other, because they kind of pretend like they don't. Like, Gambit's always kind of playing around and he's flirty and stuff like that, but he also, like, there's intent there and there's like sincerity there, and I think Rogue knows, but it's always kind of as a front, as like, haha, wouldn't it be like funny if we were together type of stuff, or like just like kind of I guess, playful flirting there that has more intention behind it. And so like there was that arc in the animated series where like they kind of realized like that they like each other a whole lot. And I feel like that's where we start with X-Men 97, where there's kind of that. But then when Magneto enters the picture and Gambit's like standing in the hallway at night and he sees Rogue come out of the office there, and then he drops the card, which is the Queen of Hearts. It's like just right on the nose there. So yeah, we'll see that triangle. I think,
and I mean, who could? Your choices in this moment are Gambit or Magneto in that magnificent M costume, just vamping around the X Mansion, looking fly as hell, like just outshowing everybody else. And then also you can touch him. Like it's not even a choice. Sorry, Gambit.
Poor
Sorry
Gambit.
for your loss. Hopefully your room is not that far from like
oh no.
hopefully your room is far enough from Rogues in the Mansion.
Yeah, sure.
It's going to be okay.
Oh no, I didn't even think of that. But yeah, I think that'll be interesting. It'll probably come back around. I don't think the show. I don't know. Again, we don't want to. I mean, it's fun to speculate and kind of spoil things. I can't imagine that they leave it that way. I think Gambit is a fan favorite, and well, something's got to happen, right? There's always got to be ups and downs, and they're always kind of off and on. I feel like it's kind of their thing.
Yeah, and I mean, is Magneto going to, like, Magneto has crossed back and forth across the line between hero and villain and anti-hero and all that. We don't know how long he's going to stay because, yes, while they're pulling storylines from the comics, they're also going in their own directions, such as the 2 Jean Grey storyline that we have here. Which is markedly different from how it happened in the comics.
Mm-hmm. I think there's also, things to consider in terms of the narrative that a lot of people have been exposed to in terms of the cinematic experience for the X-Men more recently, where like Magneto's palling around with Mystique. So I wonder if they're gonna lean on any of that stuff and any of the canon that's the kind of mental headcanon that's not canon in the animated show, but like is prevalent among fans of the X-Men who have watched X-Men movies and being like, well, are we going to see Magneto's kind of old cronies start showing up? Obviously Sabretooth and Magneto were running around together in the animated series for a while, but in terms of the show, we got a lot of the Magneto Mystique duo. So I can't imagine that Mystique's too far away. In terms of characters that I think, not necessarily Marvel, but showrunners on other movies and things, X-Men characters that they've thought are popular. I wonder if we're going to get some of that.
I mean, at the very least, we've seen Nightcrawler in the trailer. They have shown us character models for a bunch of other characters. I'm not going to necessarily touch upon those. Like, those have been shown in like panels and stuff. You can find them if you want to. But in the trailer itself, they have shown off Nightcrawler. They've shown off Genosha, what looks to be Genosha. So we may have, and for Life Death, we'll probably need to have Forge, who is a pretty pivotal character in that storyline. And as you just went back there,
I was looking for the Life Death one. I forgot.
I think it's at the end.
I moved it on accident. It's probably over here. There you go.
There you go. Yeah. And that's Forge
right here.
There. Yeah. Who has a sort of interesting romantic tie with Storm. One that is sort of dead in sort of the modern era of the comics, but
we're back in 97 now. Anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen.
We've got years of X-Men lore to go through.
And see, even in the corner there, we used to have the corner boxes that showed the characters. You got Shadowcat, Colossus, and Nightcrawler, who were on this version of the X-Men with Storm and are not present in the show at all.
Yeah.
Like, they just... And that sort of speaks to the changes that they sort of make to weave this new continuity.
I think in the old days, right, there's reasons for that. Obviously, if you have already a certain character that everybody's used to drawing, or that has, set assets for that you can kind of recycle and reuse. It makes it easier to animate a whole show. And in the animated series, the X Mansion has kind of always been a revolving door. Like, you'd get new mutants, but they'd only be around for an episode or two, and they wouldn't really kind of join the team for long. You'd sometimes get like other teams like X Factor and stuff. Those episodes are always fun because then you get a lot of new mutants at one time, and that stuff would kind of come into play. So for me, it wasn't so weird that certain main characters aren't like hanging out in the mansion like Colossus, like Nightcrawler, because I feel like they'll come around eventually. What was really cool though to see was Morph when he turned. There's a section in the second episode, I think, where Morph turns into multiple different characters. So we get like Lady Deathstrike, I think. We got Psylocke in there. And he's actually fighting as these characters and using their abilities. We saw a version of Colossus in there. So
and he turns into the Blob earlier.
And then he turns into the Blob, yeah. So we know what these characters are going to look like if they're in the show, which is really kind of cool and fascinating. Like maybe I saw it as maybe just a tease, right, to throw fans a bone, but also potentially foreshadowing of characters we could get.
And Morph gets a new look as well.
Oh yeah, he's got
in the original show, he does briefly use his original appearance, sort of as a weedy looking dude, but he has a more comic-esque, gender neutral presentation, and he has a lot of fun. Like, he's still the same character, but they just brought over sort of the comic look of the character. And they do make some of those changes. Like, if you go back through the images to the old X-Men cartoon, there's one of Henry Peter Gyrick.
Oh yeah, it's like a panel of him. This one?
So that's what he looks like in the comics. Keep going back. It's one from the animated series.
This one.
So that's Gyrick in the show. That's how he was in X-Men the animated series back in the day. That's how he looked. He was a completely different character. And then there should be another image of him in the show in 97.
There we go. This?
There.
Yeah.
Yes. So they treat the incident as canon, but they have changed the look of the character to more reflect his comic look.
Interesting.
So they're doing a little bit of interesting tweaking there and changes and doing stuff like that. That is clearly not the same guy. And if it was, you'd be like, are they letting him have hair dye in prison?
Yeah.
Like,
well, also you could get them confused with Trask too pretty easily because they're kind of similar. I think one has a mustache though, right? But that's color, kind of red hair. So yeah, I could see it. But yeah, I'm extremely excited for the rest of the show. I know that when press got the teasers, they got the first 3 episodes, and reportedly the third one is like kind of like a horror story is what I heard. So I think there's previews out for those, but now we're going to get episodes weekly. And I'm excited. I don't even think I'm going to look at the title list for the episodes. I think it would spoil too much.
Yeah. And in some cases, yeah, you probably shouldn't don't look up the Wikipedia. The Wikipedia does have all of the episode titles that we know of. And some of them are references. Like, if you looked up the title and then X-Men, you will get a specific storyline, and it will tell you basically. I think the next one does not have a direct analog. As in, if you looked up the name of the episode,
you wouldn't find the comic
X-Men.
Book.
Yeah, you wouldn't find like a specific comic book, but there are so many characters that it could be.
Before we wrap this up, because I think we're here at the end, and yes, don't go to Wikipedia, just watch our show or listen to our show. But could you? There's this one image we didn't get to talk about. This one, we didn't get to say anything about this. Professor Xavier is a jerk. Why do we throw this one in here?
So this is from I want to say this is the issue with where Storm loses her powers.
Oh, okay.
And this is a very famous issue, but it's interesting because in this case, we don't have Kitty Pryde as a major character. So at this point in the show, like, Kitty Pryde, Jubilee is essentially the Kitty Pryde, the kid character that gets to
learn the ropes. She's
learn the ropes and have fun.
Yeah.
But because of the composition of this show, Jubilee is that character, and she's far better, like, or more adjusted. And I just looked it up. This is Uncanny 168. So this is where Scott Summers first meets Madeline Pryor.
Oh, I see.
Who, again, we won't talk a lot about. But this is a fairly major Image that they sort of can't do, or if they do, like, at this point, it would be like, I mean, one, Xavier doesn't exist anymore, so we can't do that. There's no Kitty, and if they would, it'd probably be like Roberto at this point. But it's such an amazing part of X-Men canon just to see this Image again. Like, I was looking up all of this stuff, and I'm just like, oh, wow, that Image, that just came from this issue at random. This is just a fucking random opening page for this issue.
Oh man, yeah, it's good. You could feel the power. You could feel the movement in this composition. So good. All right, I think that's probably a good place to stop for today. I think we're gonna. Do you want to keep doing X-Men episodes? Do you want to wait a couple and do another one?
Probably wait a couple.
Yeah, let's wait a couple. Yeah. We'll do a couple more We'll probably do maybe we'll do one or two. Like, we'll see how the series kind of goes. If there's like a crazy episode or something, maybe we'll do it that week, or if it's a slower week. So stay tuned. We'll do more X-Men stuff, but we got so many different topics and things to talk about week to week as new news comes up. And we want to stay, as current as possible, but we obviously like talking about this stuff. And yeah, if you're looking for like an X-Men spoiler cast, I think towards the end of the season, we'll definitely, if we haven't done one by then, I think we should do one. So we'll get there. But yeah, that's it for today. Leave comments, like this YouTube video. We're eventually going to syndicate this onto podcast platforms. So if you're like an audio only listener, and we'll be there, we're going to get there. But for now, we're just kind of testing things out, seeing how this goes. We appreciate everybody who's been commenting and liking so far. So if you like it, keep it up. You want to see more of this show, let us know in the comments. Thank you so much. Mike, do you have anywhere you want to shuttle the people? Anything you want to promo while you're here?
You can find me on Blue Sky at MH Williams, like B Sky Social, whatever. I'm MH Williams on there. Yeah. You can find me on the Twitters at Automatic Zen. And no, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's a great follow. You're going to get Mike dropping facts all the time as new news and stuff comes up. But yeah, that's it for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. And we might not be back next week. We're figuring it out. I'm not making any promises. Just watch more, I guess. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Like, I have 3 cats, and they shed everywhere. And I also have my own bathroom in my house.
Sure.
My partner and I do not share bathrooms because we have different levels of cleanliness. And as you can see, I don't have a ton of hair, but my hair does end up places. So I have to assume, yeah, Beast does shed.
My other thing I was thinking about, like, what is the most inopportune time that Gambit ever energized an item?